Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts we will hear from are in cybersecurity as they discuss the evolution of endpoint detection and response to extended detection and response and how this changes revolutionizing SecOps while meeting the stringent security and compliance requirements of government organizations. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I'm the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. We are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees and a special thanks to our partners at Palo Alto Networks for helping us put together today's webinar. Before we begin, I just want to encourage the audience to please submit questions of your own in the Q&A section of this platform. And also remember to answer the poll questions as they come up throughout today's session in order to ensure that you receive your CPE credit. And with that, I would like to go ahead and begin introductions. If our panelists could please come on camera. I see we've got Josh and Blair on already. Hello there, and Bobby as well. Fantastic. So we're just going to go around, and if each of you could please introduce yourself, who you are, what agency you're with, what you do, anything else you'd like to share with us up top, this would be the time. And let's start with Josh first, please.
Hi, I'm Josh Salonis. I'm Field CTO and Evangelist at Palo Alto Networks. And my primary role is to talk to people about XDR and Cortex and all the things that we're doing over there to help productize the SOC and make your lives easier.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. And then over to Blair next.
Hi, I'm Blair Heiserman. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer and IT Security and Networking Division Chief at NIST. Obviously, being from NIST, I am on the operational side, not the research side. So I too get to take and implement the special publications. And so I try to help NIST balance its fundamental research mission across all different scientific areas, including cybersecurity.
Great, thank you. And then over to Bobby.
Hi, I'm Bobby Miller. I'm a Chief Information Security Officer for the HHS OIG. Like many of you, I'm on this zero trust journey and, trying to learn more about it and trying to implement something that quite honestly, I believe is one of the better decisions made by government in the last 10, 20 years. Is something I'm looking forward to. And as a security advocate, I'm very proud to try to support and implement. So thank you. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you all. It's great to have you here. Okay, so the first question that I'm going to pose is, what do you feel are the biggest challenges with a modern day SOC strategy? So I'm sure there are plenty, but if you could just pick one, and we'll go around, each person speak to a different challenge. And if you have, some solutions that you put into place, we'd love to hear them, but basically just speak to your experience and what that question really means to you. So we'll begin with Blair first, please.
Sure. So, obviously, one of the largest challenges is trying to ensure that you actually have hands-on all of the data that you need to actually have the awareness of your environment, the kinds of security risks that you have in it, and how you're able to ensure that you can patch, change configurations to mitigate risk that's in your environment. So being able to take that and actually have it be at a volume that your staff can deal with, I think pretty much speaks to the largest challenge that you deal with in security.
Thank you, Blair. And then I'd love to hear from Bobby next. So
for me, it's the phrase too many. You've got too many tools, too much data, too many environments. Going to the environments, I think that's actually one of the bigger challenges that my staff has experienced in the past. We moved from on-premise to in the cloud with COVID and the integration of broader BYOD within agencies. I think having people who have the experience to perform security analysis across all those different data sets is a challenge, and being able to pull that data into something that's actually usable and it gives them a view across everything is probably the biggest challenge that my folks have had.
And then Josh, I know your perspective might be a little different coming from industry, but how would you answer that question?
Well, since the last answer was too many, I'm going to say not enough. And, that's a part of my background that I didn't introduce, and I'll do real quick, is I spent 4 years as an analyst at Forrester. So I've spent countless hours talking with clients and understanding that not enough often means not enough budget, not enough headcount, not enough time to get all the things done that you want to get done. Look, we're all cybersecurity experts here, and we all know what we need to be doing, but having the bandwidth to do things like threat hunting too often is nice to have. And so my answer is not enough.
All right, well, before I move on from this question, is there any other commentary that you'd like any of our panelists to provide before we move on? Just thoughts around this discussion?
I'll say that, going to Josh's point, budget ends up playing a big part for all of this. It's security often is not baked into new operational requirements. And as a result, from security side, we are always playing catch up. And again, I think that's part of the reason I like the Zero Trust initiative so much, is it's a requirement to get implemented. And so, I think on the security side, this is our first chance to kind of try to get on the winning side of things.
Yeah, and I have to add that the not enough tools is definitely part of it, but it's also getting those tools to play well with each other, to get that consolidated view and to be able to make something intelligible from it so that you can actually take action and improve.
All right, thank you all. So Bobby just mentioned Zero Trust. Bobby, maybe I'll start with you on this next question then. With a focus on Zero Trust, what are your thoughts around getting real behavioral analytics when it comes to endpoint, network, and identity data?
So I'll say up front, I've not had a real positive experience leveraging behavioral analytics in the past, and I've never really got what I wanted out of them. I think that the challenges with integrating tools, the technical expertise, just resource challenges, similar to what we just talked about from the challenges in a SOC, really have prevented me from having a successful deployment. I think that, moving forward, particularly as we start talking more about XDR and things like that, I think behavioral analytics will become essential to providing that holistic view for the security analysts, being able to see what's happening across devices, applications on your network. That's going to be invaluable. And I hate to use the single pane of glass. No, there's never going to be a single pane of glass, but at least you might be able to get a single view across multiple layers, leveraging behavioral analytics moving forward. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
All right. And then Blair, same question thrown over to you, or any commentary based off Bobby's answer.
So I'm going to take this slightly off of behavior analytics, but essentially having posture data from each of the different areas and being able to have that easy or quick access to it, I think is, quite frankly, an invaluable tool. Where you tend to sort of run into the meat grinder of security and the too much data is when you have an environment that cannot be easily classified. So with NIST being a scientific organization, we have staff that are on site 24/7, 365, tending to scientific experiments. And so from a posture perspective, it means that we have to account for staff that are able to do so. In many other cases, behavior analytics is going to light up because you have someone who's there not during a 9 to 5 time frame. So it's being able to ensure that when you have those analytics, that they're actually relevant to your environment and that you can start to separate it into groups that actually are meaningful to your users, use cases, endpoints, and environments.
Thank you for your perspective, Blair. And then Josh, what would you say to, add on to the responses that we've heard so far and your thoughts around the trouble with behavioral analytics?
Absolutely. It's interesting because probably about a month ago, I saw a survey on Twitter from somebody who was wondering, why people hate their SIM. And I laughed whenever I saw it because, yeah, I've talked to a lot of people that aren't crazy about their SIMs, but you know what? It's been a lifesaver because it's been the only place where you can go and bring all the information together. As we're sitting here and Bobby and Blair are talking about the challenges of bringing data together and classifying it, and not just classifying it, but understanding it enough so that you can have like good intuitive results. And one of the challenges with SIM, of course, is that you have to have somebody managing it, that you have to have an understanding of the environment ahead of time in order to build and train it, and well, not even train it, because it's more of building custom analytics or detections or figuring out how to go and set your ingest rules, get things going. And most organizations I talk to, that's at least an FTE that for the care and feeding of a SIM. And with XDR, what I hope we'll see, and what we have built, but I want to be careful not to turn this into a marketing exercise here. What I hope that we are able to get out of XDR is to productize the data aggregation and the stitching together, and really to build the intelligence that we as vendors have into this product to go and alleviate that FTE plus that you're having to dedicate to managing your SIM, and then leveraging the analytics that we can build natively in order to do that classification. Because you might have people coming in at all hours, but if you're baselining and you're understanding that this is who, these are the people who are likely to be in at all hours, and boy, if they're, I hate to call them really dedicated because, you don't want to overwork your staff, but if you have people coming in at 8 a.m. some days and 6 p.m. other days, you need to be able to account for that. You need to have a system that's going to be able to understand that without the management of going through and getting an alert and saying, no, ignore that this happened here, or trying to build a custom rule to account for it. Like the baselining and the classification and the aggregation, it all has to be done in the same place. And that's really what XDR is designed to do.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Any other commentary here before we continue on with our questions? Okay, well then maybe we'll just take a quick pause and pop up our first poll question, which has to do with XDR. So if we could get that up on the screen, there we go. What features of an XDR solution are most important to you? And the options include threat hunting, detection, prevention, UEBA. So audience at home, please go ahead and respond to this, and then we can see what the results are. And I know our panelists cannot technically vote on this poll, but Bobby, what would your response have been if you were able to put forth an answer? Bobby, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I was disappointed. I really wanted to vote on that. For me, threat hunting. I think that's pretty critical. Having the ability to go find those needles in a haystack that aren't obvious to you. And it looks like that's a pretty popular answer so far.
Yeah, most people would agree with you there. And Blair, would that be the same for you, or do you have a different perspective?
So my problem is I want all of the above. I want to ensure that we are able to detect and respond, and quite frankly, to where we can use a solution like this to prevent what we know from being effective. It's essentially our big win with all of this is by being able to feed in IOCs, by being able to have the solution itself learn and detect what's going on. You're better able to lighten the workload on your staff to have less false positives. So it's that taking some of those manual correlations and making them automatic.
Yep.
And since we were talking about the classification earlier, I was surprised that it didn't look like anybody voted for the user and entity behavioral analytics. Yeah, that's an interesting strength of that technology, and it's been around for a while, is that it will go and help you find your most targeted, your most risky users. And risk can be defined in many different ways. It could be based on their behavior, the fact that they're sitting and surfing, NFL.com every Monday morning, or, I pick on that because a number of years ago, and boy, it has been a number of years ago, there was a watering hole attack that involved NFL.com, I believe. Anyway, so yeah, it's all of the above is probably what you should be looking for and expecting and evaluating whenever you're going through and looking at these products.
Yeah, great. Thank you for our audience for participating in the poll. And just as a reminder, if you have questions that come out of this conversation, feel free to send them in. But we are right on time to move on to our next question that we have prepared. So, how does the need of continuous telemetry data to analyze an environment benefit security teams today? Bobby, would you like to respond to that question first?
Sure. One of the big jobs we have as CISO is ensuring that we have ATOs that are completed for the systems, so we can say that they're secure, and that lasts for about the time that the signature is wet, if you will. Having that telemetry information, that telemetry data is critical for your security analysts that sit in your SOC and perform your incident response. Having the ability to have data at your fingertips when you need it is essential. One of the things that I think it was Josh was saying was when you start talking about pulling these different data sets together, being able to, you have an incident, being able to instantly respond to it, being able to track it down to where and mitigate it. You have to have that data. It's got to be there. The big challenge is having too much data and having it organized. But again, I think that's where XDR is going to come into the picture and help normalize that data and allow for more timely response to incidents.
Thank you, Bobby. Josh, would you like to respond next?
Well, the way that I like to approach this problem is that if you're not sending all your telemetry to the cloud in particular, you're not going to have visibility on any endpoints that are currently online, right? As opposed to having a forever, potentially, or 30-day or whatever it is, historical record in the cloud that can be accessed and hunted against at any point in time. But it also impacts your ability to do analytics, because one of the key elements, cornerstones really, of good data science is not having a biased data set. And when we talk about when we talk about the first question that you asked and having all these different technologies, point solutions, basically, and getting them aggregated and sending their information together, if we're just collecting detections, if we're just collecting indictments, we have a biased data set, and we're not going to ever find anything other than detections. It's going to create a higher false positive rate if you try to introduce any other data. And, well, technically, you already have indictments on the data that you're looking at. So you're not hunting, you're investigating. Hunting in its purest, and I would even say proper form, is it's the scientific method. It's hypothesizing that if this particular issue exists in my environment, how do I prove it using a data set or disprove it using the data set? And so if you don't have all the data, benign and bad, you can't effectively hunt and identify threats any better than you could if you weren't bringing anything together. You're still just using a bunch of point solutions.
Thank you, Josh. And Blair, would you like to share your perspective before we move on?
Yeah, so I think that all the comments are absolutely spot on. You need to have that near real-time data about your environment. That is how you get to a continuous ATO state where you are aware of the risks in your environment so that you can continue to authorize your systems for use. But you also need your telemetry data, and you need it combined with other data sets, because you have a wealth of information hitting every individual endpoint, every application, every server. And by being able to stitch the analysis across the data sets from each of those, it provides an awareness. So what you see on one endpoint suddenly becomes more severe if you're seeing that across all of them. That becomes a much more obvious threat actor that you should potentially be taking action on, or minimally be aware that that threat actor is attempting to do something. This is what you see with IOCs, where you're given information that a particular source is coming from or going to a destination, and that then helps you to have heightened awareness as to whether or not you yourself are impacted. Again, that stitching of all the data together makes certain that you can see unusual or unexpected correlations across all of those different solutions. And so I agree, that's absolutely invaluable to ensuring the protection of your environment.
Okay, well, thank you. Before we continue on, I just want to make sure, any other comments there before we move on?
I'll add one thing, and it's the completeness of that data. If you only have partial data and you have a security incident, you're already too late and you're behind. The time it takes to catch up, and sometimes you can't. So the time it takes to catch up allows an adversary to potentially move laterally, steal information, and dig themselves in, so it's even tougher to get them out.
Yeah, and I mean, the time to live based on attacks is getting shorter and shorter. The fact that we read one the other day, and it was 5 minutes to exfiltration from the initial compromise. So the timeframes we're talking about are so much faster than even an analyst who is on it, aware, immediately responding to an event. You really need to have that prevention component for what is unusual activity in your environment and to ensure that it is not allowed.
All right, well, thank you for those comments. And our panelists, I would like to turn your attention to the Q&A box, because we had a few questions come through, and I'm going to get to those in just a moment. So if you want to review them and have some of your thoughts in order before we answer them, I'm going to ask if we could please post our second poll question in the meantime. Second poll question: how important is the Mitre attack framework to your organization integrations with current and future security solutions? So please just respond about the level of importance there. And okay, back to the audience Q&A. So we have a question from Joe come in, and he has two questions. So I'm kind of going to combine them. It looks like they're about definitions. So maybe first we could answer his second question, which is what is XDR and how do you or the market define XDR? But then he has a follow-up question asking the difference between XDR and EDR. So if our panelists could please, let's help Joe out with this question. Bobby, did you want to respond?
Actually, I was still reading the question. Sorry.
Okay, no rush. Take your
I'd
time.
be happy to jump in.
Go ahead, Josh.
So I'm going to explain this in terms of the evolution of technology, and it'll just take a moment. So I'm not going to write a book on you here. The innovation of EDR was to go and start gathering security relevant event data from an endpoint system so that you could go and reconstruct the process trees and any type of inter-process communication in order to go and trace events. The way that I've framed this in the past was to think about if a process opens a file handle and reads the contents of a file, how do you figure out where the contents of that file could have come out? And in order to do that, you need to look at a few discrete events. You need to reconstruct a process table, first of all, in your process tree. You also need to look at where else that information could have been transferred to other processes other than through fork or create process, as it turns out. So in going through and solving that problem, what it allowed you to do with EDR is to take a number of events that maybe not indictable on their own, but because you now have a clear chain of execution, you're able to go and come up with a higher fidelity alert. And because you know what has happened in each step, there's almost a rule book for undoing what was done in a lot of cases. And that allows you to remediate easier. Now, that's fantastic on an endpoint. And it's critical because if we think about why the endpoint, well, simply that's where execution happens. And you can think about an endpoint as anywhere that execution happens. So it doesn't have to be your traditional workstations or laptops. It could be a container, anywhere that execution is happening. What XDR does is it starts bringing together the telemetry very similar to what EDR does, in fact, inclusive of EDR data. And it goes and it starts bringing together information from logs, from firewalls and other devices that you have, your different point solutions, if you will, you know, your network detection and response, all this stuff, bringing it together and stitching it together. So now all of a sudden you're not looking at individual process trees and IPCs that are happening on an individual endpoint. But what it's done is it's taken a step back, and now you can go and do all the things that you were doing with EDR in the context of your entire environment. It turns your environment into a kind of living, breathing organism that can be understood the way individual endpoints have been for the last 10 years with EDR technology. And I don't know, in terms of the second question, you know, there's lots of market definitions. You talk to Forrester, they have a definition. You talk to Gartner, they're going to have a definition. You talk to 10 different vendors, they're all going to have different levels of maturity of their implementation. And so they're all going to define it in terms of the way they approach it. So hopefully this kind of storytelling method has been helpful to, I guess, elucidate. I hate using big words like that, but you know, make it clear that you know what that evolution is.
Thank you, Josh. And Bobby or Blair, did either of you want to respond to that as well?
I could nowhere come close to as eloquent as Josh presented it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, just in case people didn't catch it, EDR is endpoint detection and response. and XDR is cross-layer detection and response, with the intention being that it's pulling in more than just your EDR solution.
Thank you, Blair. Thank you, gentlemen, for responding. Okay, next question. How are your organizations combating ransomware attacks, especially as ransomware as a service becomes more prevalent and the risk landscape continues to expand?
So I'll say for me personally, we haven't had to deal with a successful ransomware attack or harmful ransomware attack, and it's been a few years, but primarily because we've been lucky enough to leverage tools on the endpoint to isolate systems. So if we identified something, we isolate it from the network automatically until we can remove the malware. So we've been fortunate in that perspective.
Yeah, and we've been deploying EDR with active prevention in place. So as we see essentially unanticipated behavior that is actively blocked, reported, systems are automatically triaged. But I would also be remiss to, the National Checklist Program has a lot of secure configurations that help build a basic layer of defense by having your system properly configured to eliminate a lot of the baseness weaknesses that will come with an operating system by default. So by ensuring that you've also hardened your operating system, your applications, that can help minimize the attack surface.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for the question. James just sent a question in for us to think about. So if the team agrees that time and telemetry are two very important aspects of zero trust, would they agree that the elimination of dwell time or time to live, as Blair stated, and additionally the assembly or elimination data compilation or correlation, in fact, would be important to review as part of the end goals of zero trust architecture? So, take a moment to digest that question if you would like, and then love to hear from the panelists.
The principle behind zero trust, having been a Forrester analyst, I realized that very few people really understand what zero trust is. And there's what I like to kind of break down is a fairly simple way of understanding it. I often map it to the OSI model, frankly, just because of the way that encapsulation works. But the thing that makes zero trust is being able to validate the security of the two endpoints that are communicating. It's being able to validate the applications that are communicating. It's being able to validate that these applications should be communicating. And it's validating the contents of that communication. Without being able to validate all of that, you don't have a zero trust environment. And I'll add identity as being the other one, the user that's going and requesting the resources or the communication. Now, it's not easy to do, obviously, right? I mean, really not easy to do, especially real time. Now, when we talk about dwell time and trying to take a look at things from that perspective, I think that what we're doing is zero trust lives a little closer to that Orange Book trusted computing world than solving the problem of identifying an adversary in your environment. And it's interesting because it's two different challenges that kind of manifest in similar ways. I talked about EDR as being really good at monitoring what's executing on the endpoint itself. And that's one of the 5 things that I listed you need to be doing. You need to make sure that the environment is sane. Now, monitoring and not having a detection, is that enough to say that it's sane? Probably for the most part, when things are happening, if you're able to go and check a box on all these things, then you're doing better than 90% of anybody. But when we start talking about dwell time and elimination of dwell time, understand that we really only need to be under the time it takes for an adversary to act on objectives. And that's a different conversation. Zero trust is about keeping you from getting owned or keeping an adversary from being able to move around in your environment. John Kinderog wrote a blog many years ago called No More Chewy Centers, referring to hardening east-west traffic with zero trust. Understanding that you're never going to have a perfect environment. You're never going to have a true air gap. You need to have compensating controls, and having the best big picture of detection and ability to do analytics is critical, but not always and not the only answer to zero trust, because you still have the identity question, you still have the application question, you still have the behavioral question of should these applications or systems even be communicating, and the behavioral question of what's going on in this particular communication. So
thank you, Josh. And Blair, Bobby, comments or additional feedback?
Yeah, so I mean, I think to sort of the zero trust component, it is, I think, separate from dwell time. It's device, identity, resources, ensuring that access is authorized and authenticated every time. That is challenging. That's a posture that I think everyone is moving to. You will continue to have legacy resources that are not capable of doing that. You also, basically what we found is that, these are actually fundamental computer science principles. It's access control. It's looking at secure software development. It's looking at ensuring that you understand the supply chain and whether or not you have risk in your supply chain for your hardware or your software. It's taking a look at your software and all of the dependencies that is built into any one package or application that you are using, and being able to decouple that and take a look, because the reality is software has flaws. We are working on the correct tooling to improve coding, detection, ensuring that you have your dependencies up to date. I would be remiss to not mention that NIST has special publications going into all of these, and they are incredibly helpful guides to getting yourself familiar with the various practices. And then moving into the XDR component of it, and that actually, I think, speaks to the dwell time. So that is your ability to detect and respond and ultimately recover from anyone who is actually attacking your environment. And obviously, the better the tool you have in place, the more quickly it is able to take the data that you are feeding it and to compile back a response. Then you can actually get to that ability to respond in a time frame that allows you to prevent the attacker from getting to their objective. So I'm right there with Josh.
All right, thank you. So our next question is, how will XDR impact CM? Will XDR replace CM? Quick Google search, security information and event management is CM, unless there's another one I'm uncertain of. But how would our panelists would like to respond to that question?
The industry analyst in me will tell you that XDR solves your threat detection challenges, but not necessarily your compliance challenges or outcomes that a SIM will provide. I'll say that based on the way that the XDR market is evolving, it's evolving largely out of EDR players that are extending into XDR, and there's going to be engineering challenges so that I don't know that XDR as a technology will ever satisfy all the outcomes that it could. I say that with sadness in my heart, by the way. But you know, I mean, I'm here like many of you. Like, we're here to protect people, and having the right tooling is, you know, it's difficult to do. I think that the next, I think that we're going to see a continued evolution toward something that will replace SIM. And XDR is probably a critical part of that conversation.
Okay, so sorry, the E was throwing me. So SIM is the same acronym. So then, Josh, I'm just gonna pick on you here for a moment. So the question that Joe has about if correlating events from a SIM and UEBA tools were so difficult, why does the industry think XDR is the next silver bullet? But you kind of just responded to that in a way.
So one of the things, and I'll speak about our product, Palo Alto Networks product, for a moment. The thing that makes what we're doing special, that is admittedly a little unique in the XDR market, is that we're natively in our data lake going and stitching together and correlating the events, the logs that are coming in order to have enhanced analytics capabilities and to enable you to go and hunt for things and have the relationships be more transparent between the data, the sources, you know, to kind of give you that big picture of what's happening. I think that is the silver bullet. It's something that SIM was never able to do. It's a promise that SIM for, I mean, 20 years since ArcSight, you know, the first, I'm pretty sure they're credited with the first SIM, you know, started talking about what was going to happen. You know, we have 20 years of technological innovation that has enabled us to do some really neat things from machine learning perspectives and cloud storage perspectives and stuff like that. So it's a technological innovation that has been evolving from SIM. And honestly, I've referred to EDR many times as being the mini fridge of SIM, just because it's, you know, only endpoint data, kind of like your mini fridge is only drinks. But you know, that if you take that context, it in a lot of ways XDR unifies the goals of SIM and XDR, and that's why in theory it could be the silver bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think tying into that, it's that change that we've seen with cloud computing. You now have more storage, more compute that you're able to take and throw against larger data sets. Data science has advanced its ability to really leverage what is available. So your ability to stitch from an endpoint firewall log to a network router drop table and start to draw that across an entire enterprise of logs. Now you're starting to actually see things that previously you could feed it in, but you had to have someone go really look to pull out a thread from a particular incident. And I think that's at least what I'm seeing is the potential promise is that as all of that gets stitched together, it's telling you this is one you should be concerned about, this is not. This is regular traffic that you see occurring on your network. This is default information from the Windows operating system. It's understanding what the baseline is, what the traffic looks like. And so it helps to pull out and highlight things of concern in a way that just hasn't been possible previously.
All right, thank you all. So we got through all the audience questions. They were great. Feel free to send them in, but we're almost out of time. So if you're gonna send them in now, please. And we'll probably—
If you don't mind, I just wanted to follow up because Blair was just touching on something that we talked about earlier, and it's the importance of having that continuous data and all the data, not to be creating bias in your environment by turning what you're building into an alert aggregation machine, but to actually have it be a telemetry aggregation machine, because the data that you have impacts what you can do with it.
Thank you, Josh. Anyone else want to provide further commentary before we move on? Okay, with that, we will pop up our third poll question then. Thank you, gentlemen. There we go. Do you feel that your organization is prepared or ready to implement XDR today? So please take a moment to respond to that. Now I'll pivot back to my original questions unless we have any more audience ones that come through. So the next one of the biggest challenges with point solutions is with data fatigue and limited native integrations. With the emphasis on XDR, is a native and integrated approach an effective path to address dynamic environments today? Blair, would you like to respond to that question first?
So fundamentally, for XDR to be effective, you have to be able to ingest from all of the different data sources. You have to be able to pull in from a cloud environment, from various containerized solutions, from your endpoints, from your IoT devices on your network, to essentially capture as much information as possible so that you can essentially build that overall posture awareness. And quite frankly, I think that's the challenge that everybody's running into, which is it is not easy to take all of the different tools and applications and random devices that people want to use because they are convenient, not because they are secure. Even things that people don't think about, people don't often consider printers, but they should. It's being able to capture the right information at the right time to be able to really pull it out. And actually, I'm going to go back to your previous poll question, because I actually think talking about the Mitre attack and defend frameworks are invaluable for organizations. If you want to know what your adversaries are doing, that's what that will tell you. Defend will give you potential mitigation measures on how to protect yourself from those exact types of attacks. If you do nothing other than go browse through it, pick a random attack measure, see what it advises is how to protect yourself from it, you can improve your security posture quite easily by simply doing that.
Thanks, Blair. And Bobby, did you want to respond?
Make sure I was not muted. I don't have a whole lot to add on that. I think that when you start talking about data fatigue, it is a real thing. It's something that I think every SOC has to struggle with. And when it comes to native and integrative approach, and I would welcome the opinion of the other panelists, that native approach is something we're going to have for a while, but it ought to integrate. It ought to transition into the integrated approach, but it ought to provide us a cleaner look at what we're dealing with And we ought to have a little bit more, I hate using the word synergy, but synergy between the different data sets that we have based off the analytical capabilities that XDR is going to provide us.
Thank you, Bobby. And Josh, would you like to respond too?
I'm just on the same page with what everybody else has said here. The importance of the Mitre framework, I'm just short of busting out some pom-poms and waving them in the air. I think that it is one of the most important things that we as an industry have available to us. When we talk about things like detection engineering, being able to go through and figure out what the hallmarks, what the tactics, techniques, and procedures of a particular adversary that's known to target your industry, organization, whatever, and being able to go and look at those and then say, do I have the proper technologies in place to be able to go and detect that adversary? And then to take it to the next step and say, all right, well, this technology is supposed to help me here. So now let's do a blue team exercise or a purple team exercise in order to go and validate that not only does my technology light up whenever somebody comes in leveraging those tactics, techniques, and procedures, but does my SOC even have the ability to respond? Like, it's one thing for a light to turn on the box that you just paid a bunch of money for, but if nobody does anything about it, have you lost? Have you won? Where are you? Yeah, you've made it easier for your incident response team to come in and triage what happened, but ideally you're going to get to do that beforehand, before the bang.
Yeah, and I think tying into Bobby's comment, it's important for us to have a common language, and this is a standards organization, so obviously we would love people to abide by standards. That makes integration much easier. Data science has helped us in this regard across the different products that we're using, in that to some extent it no longer matters if you have different data formats. Your machine learning can help to correlate across the different formats. Would it be great if everybody had a common format? Sure, that would be incredibly helpful. Certainly CVEs or common vulnerability enumeration, CCEs for common configuration enumeration, so that you're speaking about the same setting, the same vulnerability, the same kind of exposure, having your CVSS score for ratings for severity. It lets everyone ensure that they're talking with similar levels of criticality about something in their environment, which helps focus and prioritize, as we started off talking about, the limited resources and staff that we have available to us, so that we are best able to leverage the tools that we have.
Great, thank you so much. I want to get to one or two more audience questions before we run out of time, but let's go ahead and pop up our third poll question. Unless we already did and I'm losing my mind.
We did.
Never mind, I'm sorry. Okay, on to the next audience question. Please compare and contrast telemetry and alert data.
Because we're gonna getting close to the end of the hour, and I've been using these terms, let me just take this real quick so that maybe we can get to another question here. So when I discussed earlier the concept of using security relevant data in order to go and reconstruct process trees and IPC communications, I wasn't using the term security relevant in terms of security alerts or detections, is the building blocks that you need in order to do those detections. So telemetry is not good or bad. It is log data for all intents and purposes. When you have alert data, that is telemetry that you have made an indictment on that's packaged up and sent over. I think that that's probably the simplest differentiation that I can provide there. I hope that was helpful. If not, ping the question box again. And
yeah, thank you, Josh. Okay, so then the next question from Joe, what are some key dependencies for a successful XDR deployment?
You need to take time to plan. I mean, we have, M2209, which lays out what we need to get done. But identifying those core functions, identify the funding to support your planning and your implementation. But take the time to plan it out. Speak with the other stakeholders in the organization. This isn't just something you implement on security. It is an organizational effort to implement.
Thank you, Bobby. Would anyone else like to respond to that?
Yeah, Bobby's absolutely right. To really make it successful, you're going to need to work across your organization, across your operational teams, depending on how your organization is structured, your business units, etc., to ensure that all of the different areas are aligned in the implementation and they understand the implications of what it does and, quite frankly, how it protects them.
Thank you. And Josh, did you want to add?
They're spot on. The only other thing that I'd add is, there's been a lot of conversation about the evolution from EDR to XDR. Make yourself successful by going the XDR route now. I think that the market has shown that this is the direction of where things are going. If you're shopping for the best EDR product, you're going to be shopping for the best XDR product sooner or later. May as well get that box checked now so that you have something that will grow with you.
All right, great, thank you. And then this last one, I think this might be a bit more of a comment, but foundational challenge is what Bobby mentioned. Complexity and too many tools, need a simple understanding for your security posture and cyber hygiene. Zero trust approach journey is the start. So I think that's more of a comment. Thank you, Gurmeet. All right, we only have a few minutes left in this panel discussion, so I want to go around and have each of you share your final thoughts or a key takeaway. It could be something that you learned yourself or something that you really want our audience to walk away with having a better understanding of. So if we could start with Blair, please, what do you think is the most important thing to end our audience with?
So fundamentally, protecting your environment is risk-based decisions. Understand the resources you have available, the staff you have, and what you actually have the capability of deploying to protect your environment. XDR is helpful, but if you can't ensure that you're deploying a secure operating system as a starter, start with the basics, work your way out, start with your public or most valuable assets, prioritize, and work into better solutions. Now, it may be that tools like XDR and EDR will be one of your first steps because of the protection that it provides for you. But there are many ways to step through this and always ensure you've got your fundamental building blocks in place.
Thank you, Blair. And Bobby, what would you like to leave our audience with? Bobby, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. The most important thing we have is our data. And, in my career, this is the first time we've had the federal government so strongly supporting the implementation of security. This is your opportunity to take advantage of that. who knows when it's going to come again. So be aggressive in approaching zero trust and implementing it. XDR is a great component of that, but be aggressive, over communicate with within your organization, but don't let this opportunity pass you by.
Thank you. And Josh, we will end it with you, sir.
Find a partner. All of your environments are different. Every one of your environments is going to pose different challenges. Find a partner that will work with you to make sure that your implementation is successful, and it'll help you be successful.
Excellent. Love it. Thank you all so much. And we are just out of time. So I want to thank our partners again over at Palo Alto Networks and our panelists. And of course, you all at home today. Thank you for joining us and sending in your questions. And we really hope to see you at ATARC's next event, which is this Thursday, February 10th. If you participated in the poll questions and you would like your CPE credit certification emailed to you, please go ahead and answer our fourth and final poll question. That way we know if we should send it to you or not. But other than that, go ahead and register for the next one on strengthening and empowering the federal workforce, and look forward to seeing you all there. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. Bye.